So it's been a yearly tradition since 2019 that I would talk about all the events for the said worlds of mainly Legos Island. And then I think starting in 2020/2022, I started doing it for the labs. And then I think 2023 for the creations world. But you get the point. What I'm referring to here is every single year around the beginning of January, aka the beginning of just the said year, I would normally go into detail regarding what events were coming for the said year for all these locations. Oh, wait, and the backyard too. Want to make sure that I didn't forget about that. Anyway, this has been a reoccurring tradition practically ever since 2019. And unfortunately, I can confirm that 2025 would be the final year that I would do this. Because very recently, I made the decision to kill off this tradition entirely and stop announcing all the events at the beginning of the year. And I have my reasons for this. So, in this Saturday Stories, I will be exactly explaining why I decided to just not do this tradition anymore. And trust me, I think the reasons are very good. So without further ado, let's immediately jump right in. So this actually can be traced all the way back to April 28th, 2025. It was in my Discord DMs with GoGat33. I purposely stated, hey, so I wanted to come on here and say that I think I'm going to stop announcing all the events for each area at the beginning of the year, because if it hasn't become obvious, the schedule is always changing throughout the year, making the original video for outdated and pointless after. And that is actually one of my main reasons. It is true, actually, because a lot of times, normally, the schedule would always get completely different by the time the end of the year rolls around, making the original video feel pointless, which is technically true. I mean, have you seen the amount of times the schedule has changed throughout all these years from the original video? Yeah, a whole lot. I later followed it up with saying, yeah, I'm sorry about this. It was a very hard decision to make. As I explained, the schedule is always changing to the point where it just doesn't make sense anymore. And that again is true. With the schedule changing all the time throughout the year, for all of these areas respectively, it just doesn't make sense. It legitimately makes the original videos feel outdated at the beginning of the year. So at that point, why continue if that's just going to keep happening? And to be honest, a lot of this year in 2025 is pretty much completely different from what was originally said at the beginning of the year. And I'm actually not kidding about that. Ever since the events of Operation Reality and its conclusion, I have thought of some very creative event ideas. So now you get my point, right? That is exactly why when the labs returned in May of 2025, you may have realized after Operation Reality ended, you may have realized we didn't announce the event schedule for Zolzop 2 and 3 after Reality ended. And that's because of this reason. Because, as of right now, I don't even know what the remainder of the year is going to look like for these worlds. Because it always changes. You never know what I'm going to come up with next. And that's why a lot of the times, most of the events are always a surprise now. Kind of how they were back in like 2015 through 2018. And honestly, I kind of like that because it didn't make me always follow a specific schedule that I promised at the beginning of the year, which is something I now really should have looked into a little more, by, not doing that. But I will admit, it was fun kind of doing these videos for a while, even if they did end up becoming outdated after a while. But yeah, so that can explain why I didn't announce any events for the Souls Up 2 and 3 worlds. Like, immediately after Reality ended, I didn't go into the schedule. Because at the time, I hadn't had it fully figured out at the time. Because the labs had just reopened at the time. So, yeah. And that won't be happening anytime soon. Or just ever again. Because now, with everything changing all the time and me coming up with more and more creative ideas, it just doesn't make sense anymore to announce the schedule only for it to be completely different by the end of the said year. And that's something I really should have realized sooner in earlier years when making these videos. But anyway, with all that said, that is the end of this Saturday Stories. That is legitimately the reason why I stopped doing this. And yeah, so when we hit January 3rd next year for 2026, yeah, it's just going to be a normal episode. So that's going to be a bit weird after 7 years. Anyway, I'll see you all in the next Saturday Stories on July 12th, which I also got figured out.